Hello, everybody, and welcome back to your Premier Injury live stream. Just before deadline, we have got a full chat already, Ben. We've got loads of questions ready for you. And just to remind everybody, we're going to go through the teams alphabetically. But also, if we miss any of your questions or if you can't get in contact with us, whatever, before the deadline, head over to the Premier Injuries website. As you can see here, we've got the Premier League injury table. Like the way we're going through it, it's all alphabeticalized. You can click on any team and find out which player has an injury or not. But yes, how are you doing today, Ben? It's the new year, 2023. Are you feeling totally different now that the calendar has changed?
See, I'm not. It's a live stream. I'll not swear. No, mate. Look. Same work, isn't it? Just a different year, just a different number. We crack on as always. Maybe I'll have a little bit of time to reflect in January when the fixtures ease back a little bit. But this quick turnaround from 18 to 19 has been a tough one to negotiate. Let's just say it's been a little bit of a logistical nightmare. It caused a few headaches for a lot of FPL managers. I dare say, because like I say, we'll not have all the information to hand, and two, even those managers that we have heard from, assessments and evaluations will continue and will ongoing, with late calls probably being made a lot nearer to kickoff. So it's going to be, like I say, it's a difficult one, even though in the last round we always talk about build that bench as strong as you possibly can with 3 starters. And even like last time out, I ended up with only 10 men playing with rotation and late injuries. So not the best start of the year. Hoping to bounce back in this one. Holding back a free transfer because of the possibility of maybe a couple of double game week fixtures being shoehorned into 20 that I'll make to look to take advantage of. So like I say, for me at the moment, I'm going to try and get 11 starters, and then we'll see where that takes me from there.
And just in terms of your personal return to play status, because you have been recovering from illness, there you go, a bit of the cold or whatever was in you. I mean, would you say 90% ready to be back on the field?
Well, I'm 100% better. I'm still not quite there. Just a bit of a tickling cough, which... Excuse me. So I'll try and mute as I cough, and I have got a drink here. So, look, on the road to recovery, maybe not 100%, but feeling good.
Is it an alcoholic beverage as well, or is it just water?
It is absolutely not an alcoholic beverage. I've never had any over the Christmas and New Year. Wow. Rarely do. Yeah. So it is. No, I tell you what this is. This is my sports supplement.
Oh, there you go.
No, well, I'm not going into names and all of that at this point, but
until they advertise us, then of course we. So let's go on to Slavcho's question. He says, please butcher at least one name. We need to start the year strong. I mean, start as we mean to go on, but Slavcho, we've never butchered a name like Kevkevsky, or who's the other one that we normally do as well?
Estupian.
Percy.
Yeah, look, that new year, new leaf, a new way of attacking these pronunciations of these Premier League footballers' names.
Brilliant. I mean, that's the way that we're going to go about it. But we're going to stick to the usual kind of methodology of going alphabetically. So we're going to start with Bournemouth. Any news there, Ben?
Look, this is a difficult one. Massively disappointing result, the defeat of Crystal Palace. That might prompt Gary O'Neill to, shuffle his pack a little bit, just in terms of freshening up his side. There's a couple of players on the fringes of that start 11. But in terms of who potentially could miss out, now we've seen Philip Bingham forced off. That's an apparent hip problem impact. So that's going to be a 50-50 call. Like I say, it's one of those ones where it could evolve and turn into something different. We may get some more news ahead of the deadline, but possibly not. Like I say, these public holidays and the way everything's felt made that very, very difficult. So I've actually omitted Philip Bingham from the start 11 here. That's, like I say, I'm just trying to play the percentages here And I have stuck with two up front, but look, there is a flexibility in that lineup. In the absence of Philip Bingham, I have brought in Dembele. Now he's a young player who hasn't had much of a looking up to this point, but he was probably one of their, I'm not going to say standout performers because, like I say, the performance wasn't great, but he was one of their brighter lights on the day. And maybe, like I say, it's an opportunity for him to come in and get that start. I also included sort of Rothwell as well on that left-hand side and brought Christie back into the team. But like I say, that's more to do with the fact that, just after a hugely disappointing result, he's going to want some kind of response from his team.
And just in terms of maybe the rotation risk, so I think we covered this in the last live stream, but some people might not have heard it, might not have continued over to this one. A lot of talk around this time of year previously has been rotation risk, players going to be given a bit of time off because of the fixture congestion. But do you think that the opposite might be true this year? Because of the World Cup, we've had that gap. A lot of players have actually had time off. And in fact, some players might be risked, the dice might be rolled on them just because they need that match sharpness.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly different this year as we've seen typically year on year around the festive fixture programme. Players aren't coming in with that accumulative load already into this congested period. And inevitably, we've seen that between 17 and 18, there's plenty of recovery time. And even 18 to 19 for some teams isn't too bad. So it's about individual managers being able to look at those players. And, there's also a slight feeling that those players who've been away at the World Cup and had those competitive minutes in the legs will probably fare better than their counterparts who've remained at home during this period. Bounce games, behind closed doors, friendlies, training. Then you factor in the heavily disrupted sessions caused by the weather at some points, and that's set all of these players back a little bit. So yeah, look, I mean, we're certainly not seeing as much rotation so far, and as an adage of that, I'm certainly not seeing that spike in the number of reported injuries that we would typically see at this type of the season. It could be later on in the year. We just don't know. We've never had a mid-season break, as it were, and a World Cup competition shoehorned in there as well. But certainly in terms of the incidents and the rotation, it's all down. So it's all good on that front, which, in theory should make things a little bit easier for FPL managers.
So let's turn it to the top team. Arsenal extended their lead this previous game week. And again, the team is pretty much unchanged, apart from you're thinking Zinchenko will join that back line.
Yeah, obviously I'm expecting a massive, massive defeat for the Gunners at Game Week 19. How they're going to live with Newcastle at the Emirates, it's difficult to see them being able to get anything from this. But all joking aside, fantastic they were against against Brighton, sorry. I was a potential banana skin. I think I even messaged you to say this is it, that Arsenal are going to get beaten, and that was it 65 seconds before Saka effectively ended the game there and then. Although, a late spurt, maybe that coincided with the withdrawal of Zinchenko and Ben White, and there was a couple of little nervy moments defensively. Mitoma goal disallowed, which would have made for an interesting finish. But yeah, look, Arsenal performing really, really well. We've discussed it, I think, on the last stream. Mikel Arteta spoke about that high accumulative load in his players, and he said, look, if you want to play at the highest level and you want to perform optimally, you need to get used to doing that. Look at Messi, look at Ronaldo. So you need to go out and you need to dust yourself down and you need to go out there and play again. So I expect very few or no change at all. I think the fact that Zinchenko was managed in and around that hour mark is fairly indicative that he wants him back for that Newcastle game. We said Tomiyasu, who came in for Ben White. He's still building up that load following ongoing muscle problems. The latest one that he picked up at the World Cup. Elsewhere, Emile Smith-Rowe back in, more or less fully with the group, but I think, maybe the FA Cup is a more realistic opportunity for him to get minutes within that team. Everybody else, really, they pretty much pick themselves.
I think as well, we're joking there about Newcastle and obviously us chatting with each other as fans of each club, but this is going to be, I think, one of those table-topping games. It'd probably be bore draw, if I'm honest. You know, you guys have been the best defence probably since about game week 10. We've been there or thereabouts. Both of us exceptional attacks, but I think it's going to be one of those games that neither team wants to lose. And so it will affect team selections, won't it? You know, do you go that conservative route where most of these games are less than 2 or 3 goals? Or do you kind of go and roll the dice on the likes of Martinelli and Saka and maybe Almiron, who've all been in form? We've seen Arsenal, I can't remember how many clean sheets. Is it 1 or 2 at home this season? It's a pretty bad record. Even though the team have been strong at the back, there has been a few errors, and the attack of the team has kind of done well to make up for that. And also there is the history. Newcastle and Arsenal games are always very high scoring. So I don't know, how do you see this one playing out?
It's tough. I mean, look, going into that game against Leeds, was it 6 straight? I think we had one, and everything that we seemed to touch ended up in the back of the net. Leeds come up with a game plan, St James's Park. We struggled to break them down. Maybe we looked a little bit jaded. Maybe it was just that little bit of quality in the final third. We've got players, you know, banging on the door on the fringes of that starting 11. You know, I'm thinking of Alan Saint-Maxim. So, you know, there's opportunities there for players to come in if Eddie Howe wants to freshen things up. I certainly think that Callum Wilson will come in for Chris Wood. He's had more time on the training pitches. I think we'll go out and just continue the way we've been playing. I don't necessarily see any great change in our own philosophy, because it's worked so well. You know, we've performed excellently against a lot of the top teams. Manchester City at home was one that sort of sticks to mind, and very unlucky not to get 3 points in that game. So I'm looking forward to an entertaining game. As you know, if we can avoid defeat, then happy days. But you know, I fancy goals in this one. I really do.
GV has said 5 wins or 7 wins in a row. Law of averages should catch up. So, and Midnight is agreeing with you. There will be goals for sure. And it is interesting, just quickly, Arsenal have had only 1 clean sheet at home all season, despite having the best XG conceded at home data as well. They've actually underperformed XG conceded data by 2 goals there. So maybe that's the Achilles heel there. They need to improve that defence at home. But Aston Villa, they've impressed. Unai Emery, really good manager. You know, talking of the Arsenal links there, he the former Gunners boss, he's done well already. I think, you know, what's impressive is he's got the team playing quite nicely, but also there's going to be more defensive solidity, and maybe as we progress through the season, because I rate him so much as a manager, maybe those Aston Villa assets might become viable. But what is the injury news there? Because I think Kamara coming back is a huge boost to that midfield.
Yeah, he came back towards the first half of the season, but arguably wasn't fully match fit, able to get some good time in on the training pitches during that break, and he's come back in and you know, he's performed really well alongside Douglas Luiz. So he's been a big boost for the Villains. In terms of where we are, we know they have 2 longish term absentees, Diego Carlos at Achilles, and also Ramsey, hamstring issues. The 2 latest problems now. So bearing in mind that their last game was barely 24 hours ago. John McGinn had a slight issue with his hamstring. So I've actually omitted him from the starting 11 here. And that's, again, we're just trying to play the percentages. We know hamstring injuries in particular need to be managed very, very carefully. High recurrence, high re-injury rates, and even minor issues. If you force players back too soon, we could be looking at a significant period on the sideline. So that's what I've went, you know, on the side of caution with this one, just because of the tightness of the FPL deadline, and we stuck Coutinho in there, and it might be more of a 4-2-2-2 as opposed to this more rigid 4-4-2 that I've got it set up in. And the other injury or slight concern is Douglas Luiz. He picked up an ankle problem That was a knock. That gives him a little bit more of a chance of recovering. But of course, if he doesn't, then Leandro Dendoncker would be the player who could potentially just come in, and that would be a like-for-like swap.
So Marius has asked the question, Coutinho's starting. He's put a little shocked face there as well. And also, no Ings.
Yeah, look, I would obviously be very tempted to change things up given the turnaround, but then you're weighing things up with regards to the result and the 3 points and how the team performed. And look, is he going to drop Watkins or Bailey? And I'm not a big fan of Bailey's either. I don't think so. Of course, there's always that possibility there. Coutinho again wouldn't have necessarily been me choice, but given the fact that we've probably got question marks over Louise, Ramsey's already out, and now McGinn, we are limited in the options that we do have at our disposal. The other, I suppose, point to make here is Martinez, I have starting in goal, and also Matty Cash. These are two that I may, the Robin Olsen starting in goal. Does he drop him off the back of a clean sheet? He probably does, for Emi Martinez, but there are no guarantees with that. And Matty Cash, again, that may come down to Ashley Young and the fact that, he's certainly on the twilight years of his career, and he may need that little bit more recovery time. So that's why we have Matty Cash here. But look, that's just two players just to bear in mind if you are looking at this lineup.
And just for Marius, do you want to do like a rendition of that shocked face? There you go. That is very Home Alone style, isn't it? Brentford are up next, and you've got Toney in the 11. Now, we saw him being stretchered off. There was all this worry that, with impending investigations, we don't know what's going to happen there. But we thought this could be the last time we see Toney for a while. And now all of a sudden, well, I saw it as well. Thomas Frank said he could be in the squad for the game this week.
Yeah, he did. So, it was a fairly innocuous mechanism from the footage. It wasn't very, it was nothing you could derive from it to say, what exactly was going on. And all the reports and everything suggested that it was a problem with his knee. Thomas Frank confirmed that. Mentioned that it could be meniscus or even that lateral collateral ligament. But we'd wait until further evaluations. Now, Thomas Frank's come out and he said it's more of a muscle issue. So I'm not sure if that relates to maybe the more what we would say the distal aspect of the hamstring, which the insertion point is right down behind the knee, and maybe that was a problem. Just again, you don't know exactly. It was too difficult to make out from the footage, in all honesty, and the fact that we have this quick turnaround as well. I just think if there's any chance for Thomas Frank to include Ivan Toney in his team, he's going to do that, because such is his influence and his importance to that lineup, and the fact that he has this pending. These allegations from the Football Association with regards to over 30 betting offences, that could mean that, he's going to miss a significant period due to any potential suspension that's handed out to him. So I think, with that in mind, he's maybe more likely to take a chance on his striker because, like I say, he doesn't know how much longer he may have at his disposal. But the fact that he's been cleared of serious injury, it's obviously great news for him and great news for Brentford.
Yeah, and it's good. We never like to see people injured, and Toney is a fantastic player when he is on the pitch. Brighton are up next, and as we mentioned at the start, they played Arsenal 4-2, and what I found amazing was they grew into that game. They never gave up, even though they went behind quite a few times. Every time they kind of got back into the game, Arsenal had a reply. But Mitoma has definitely stood out as a great player. But what is the kind of injury news there? You're keeping Trossard as the lone striker.
Yeah, there was hope that Danny Welbeck could potentially return and force his way, but it's probably going to come a game too soon. And again, maybe the FA Cup is more realistic for him. The two sort of main changes that we have in the team, one of those comes at right back. I mentioned before that I only had 10 players last time out. Veltman was one of those players in my team. Unfortunately, he dropped out for Tariq Lamptey. I'm changing those two round again. And secondly, Moses Caicedo returning in that holding role. We spoke about it ahead of on the last stream that Billy Gilmore, the on-loan midfielder, would come in. He did, and he'd done an okay job. But like I say, Caicedo is very much the first choice in that role. So those are the two obvious changes in there. There's not a great deal that De Zerba couldn't be looking to do to change things up. And we've seen, prior to the break when I think Brighton were involved in midweek fixtures, he's not afraid to leave them the bulk of his squad in his starting 11 pretty much as they were. So like I say, I think we'll continue more or less with that team. Always question marks with regards to Adam Lallana. Given his injury problems, he's a player that does tend to pick up the odd muscle problem, hamstring related. So, if anybody was to be rotated out, then maybe Adam Lallana, it would be that player.
Just bringing it to Marius's question, he said, I guess he's asking who would play instead of Ivan Toney up top. Who do you think would replace him?
Yeah, so I've only recently changed this back following the news, and I had Jonas Wissa is the player who deputised for Toney when he was missing. I think early part of 2022. I think Toney had a little spell on the sidelines for around about maybe 3 to possibly 4 weeks, and Wissa was a player that was partnered alongside Brighton Mbeumo.
Right, so Chelsea up next. I think we did have a Chelsea question, so I'm going to look through that. Was Ben, you discuss the injury news for the team? Any kind of big things after what was frankly a very disappointing result against Nottingham Forest? Looking at the data, looking at their style of play, they're not a good team. And we've written about this, we've discussed this, haven't we, many times, that they're just not a top 4 team at the moment at all, are they?
Yeah, they're struggling. Graham Potter yet to, I suppose, have his team playing exactly how he'd want them to. For me, there's too much chopping and changing in and around this in terms of his formation, his tactics, his setup, and also personnel. There are a couple of questionable players that I see sometimes included in that team. I certainly think Conor Gallagher hasn't maybe been afforded the opportunities that I believe he has. I mean, I just looked at that player that performed for Crystal Palace last season, and I'm wondering why he's not in that Chelsea team. What is it that he's not doing potentially in training? Because on those sort of cameo performances that I have seen for Chelsea, I think one was against Crystal Palace where he came on late and actually scored the winner. He is deserving of a place, but injuries at the moment, the injury list is fairly extensive. So there are not a lot of competition for places in terms of there. People may be asking about Hakim Ziyech being one of those, on the back of his performances out in Qatar. But like I say, the player that we've seen from Morocco isn't necessarily that we've seen the player at Chelsea in recent times. And, you then question, who's he going to drop? Possibly Christian Pulisic as an option. Elsewhere, I do have Mateo Kovacic in there. Zakaria is a player who has been deputising in recent times, but he certainly doesn't give you what Mateo Kovacic does. Elsewhere, the other main talking point may be with regards to Thiago Silva. We know what's he now? Is he 38? So again, minutes and these quick turnarounds could be the issue. If Graham Potter wants to change things up, then he does have Chevaloa. The possibility of even maybe go with 3 at the back and putting them in there and pushing Cucurella and Azpilicueta further up the pitch. If that does happen, then even Gallagher could come in for Azpilicueta. We just don't know. They have that flexibility and fluidity within the team, but their assets aren't particularly ones that are being necessarily drawn towards anyway at this point, given they're in different form.
Yeah, and a lot of people are focusing on the fact that they got a double game week, but I don't know if that double game week's all that good. They play Fulham and they play Manchester City. In both those games, I can see them conceding. yes, against Fulham, they got a high chance of probably scoring maybe one or two, but realistically, Fulham have been really impressive this season, and you know, credit to Marco Silva. He's got that team playing well, whereas it's completely the opposite with Chelsea's both of their managers as well. The other thing is, you know, can we say with all honesty that Chelsea have improved under Graham Potter? And I don't think so. We've not even seen a new manager bounce effect. There's not been that kind of little trend of upward better results. It's been pretty bad as well. Midnight has said it, and I would agree as well. Haaland will destroy that Chelsea defence. I don't think they fit together well. And there's a lot of over-reliance on the wing-backs, or there was when they were fit, for chance creation. Now, where did they come from? Since game week 10, you know, Chelsea are in the bottom, I think it's 5 or 6 teams for XG created. They're in the bottom half of the table for chances created. They're in the bottom half of the table for big chances created. They're just not really doing a lot going forward, and defensively they're being pretty suspect as well. So I would avoid them as well. Somebody has given us a question related to this, I guess. They've got 2 double game week Chelsea players, Cucurella and Mount. Would you sell Darwin for Mitrovic or Roll? So I guess it's linked to this. I guess with Mitrovic, bringing him in, he's got the double game week, doesn't he? And I like those fixtures for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you're just hopeful that Mitrovic comes through that first game without picking up a caution. Otherwise, you know, that rules him out of that second game. So ultimately, what you believe is it's Mitrovic in Leicester in that first match, and then, you know, if something comes after that, then it's a bit of a bonus. So I think I'll base any decision on a single game shootout. Like I say, if that second game comes along because he gets through and hasn't picked up a caution, then that's a bonus. Yeah. But I do like him against Leicester, by the way. Yeah. I think there's a possibility there, a strong possibility, you know, just given his aerial threat, how Fulham are playing and how bad Leicester have been. And I'm not looking at that game at Anfield too much, you know, more the game against Newcastle. That in the absence of Johnny Evans, I think they will struggle.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Mitrovic is the type of player that will punish Leicester. And so even in that one-game shootout, I would say I'd favour Mitrovic over Darwin. Just because Mitrovic as well, he's scoring goals, whereas Darwin Núñez is getting so many chances. What was the stat that you sent me earlier in the week? Was it most big chances missed or something like that?
8 out of 18 big chances, he's missed 14.
So there you go. That kind of answers a lot of it. Now, Crystal Palace, they bounced back. They had a pretty improved performance. What is the latest with them? Are any players returning to the side to bolster them?
Only just James Tompkins returns after his suspension, but he won't threaten any of the back two unless there are any late withdrawals. We spoke about how, you know, the possibility of Patrick Vieira could shake things up. He didn't, and they went out and got a result against Bournemouth. So I don't expect too many changes from the Eagles.
And Eze was looking pretty tasty as well. He's just a pretty class player. So moving from the Eagles to Everton, and you've got Calvert-Lewin starting. This is somebody that we talked about quite extensively, and honestly, it's quite sad, you know, with all his injury history. But he's back. Is this, you know, back and he's going to get 60 minutes? Is he going to get the full 90? Are they going to treat him conservatively?
I mean, he started against Manchester City, which came as a bit of a big surprise, given the fact that he had limited time on the training pitches. We heard how Frank Lampard had talked about managing his return. We've known what's happened, you know, over the last 13, 14, 15 months. But, you know, the pressures of you know, needing to try and get, you know, wins and points on the board, and you're hovering precariously close to that drop zone. You know, they do, you know, the stakeholders, that does influence your decisions. And I suppose it just highlights the importance of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, because they don't really have anybody else that's able to playing that kind of role. They certainly don't have any out-and-out goal scorers. Frank Lampard even talked about the return of Ellis Sims from Sunderland, who's been on loan, as a possibility of being added and given some competition up front. You know, what does that really say about Nimo Pai? It just hasn't really clicked since his arrival. So we do have Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Other potential sort of discussion points. I've got Tom Davies starting in midfield. That was because Onana picked up his 5th caution of the campaign. I've went with Damari Gray and also Awobi, but you could go with Dwight McNeil, and also we're waiting to find out on Anthony Gordon if he can recover from illness. Other than that, like I say, I think we're pretty much as we were in terms of that back 3 stroke back 5. Although Seamus Coleman came on and did a great job at the Etihad in his sort of 20+ minute cameo for Nathan Patterson.
So we got a couple of really good comments on this as well. Going back to Darwin Núñez, Marius says, Darwin, XG Merchant, maybe Gakpo can help them somehow by creating some competition. I think is a good analysis there. GV has said something that we're kind of reflecting here. We'd like, all FPL managers want to see DCL get back to form. He's had a torrid time with injuries. But we do have a question on Reece James. What is the latest on him?
Yeah, latest is, he's progressing basically as we hope in terms of where he is. Expectation, we're looking at around about a month on the sidelines. So certainly in terms of his return to play for the Premier League, I think realistically that would be maybe early in February. Of course, with our fixtures to be decided towards the end of January, I think they will be determined around about the FA Cup. So providing, results in the 3rd round. But, it's a player that unfortunately just needs to be managed and managed very carefully at that. So, is he somebody that can be relied upon by Graham Potter? Maybe not. And, we've spoke about, return to players and not necessarily return to performances. Is he a player that I particularly want to be investing in at this point? Or certainly, with on the radar in February? Not really. I'd want to see more from Chelsea. And then I also want to see a lot more from Reece James and seeing what he's producing and how Graham Potter is going to decide to use him.
Marius says, he says, probably that he agrees that he wants DCL to get back to form, but not this game week because he has Dunk playing. Now, we've already talked a bit about Mitrovic, Fulham. Obviously, he's 1 card away from being banned. But is there any other kind of impending or important injury news or suspension news for Fulham?
Yeah, nothing in terms of where we are. Marcus Silva had the team in on New Year's Day. That was a recovery session. Of course, they will be buoyed by that late victory over Southampton. They've been in great form, so that's why we've went with an unchanged 11. Any tweaks, might involve the likes of, again, we've touched upon it before with Thiago Silva, Willian. He's pushing the years out now as well, and he's not long been back in the Premier League. So Marcus Silva does have options in terms of maybe the likes of Daniel James and what have you, who could come in to that, attacking 3 across in behind Mitrovic. But I've left it at that just because they have the momentum. Mitrovic, he did reference, he said, he is getting better. That's a hark back to that foot problem which caused those ongoing fitness issues. But like I say, he's not a player that I would expect to be on the sidelines. I think, if he's anywhere near fit, such is his importance, his starts.
We got a question on this. Do you bench Salah, Odegaard, Rashford, Núñez or Martinelli for Andres Pereira?
Who was the last option there? Because I heard
Martinelli.
They're big calls. Like they're really, really big calls. If you're asking me from a Newcastle supporter, because I wouldn't drop Odegaard. I just think you can't. He's in the form of his.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say his life, but he's in the type of form that Real Madrid, convinced him to bring him across as a 15-year-old and probably the type of player he wanted. And Martinelli, looked a threat and looked great the other night. I'm going to say no.
Oh,
I'm going
to
to say
any of
no.
them. Interesting.
But
That is a
it's
big
tough.
call.
Yeah, tough.
See
Tough.
now, Marius has kind of contravened you and said Andreas is his captain this week, who needs Mitrovic, and GV has kind of backed him up and said with that problem Mitrovic has, it is a slight risk. But that's the way that you want to play it, Ben. Totally fine. And as we always say, Ben is Mr. Differential King. He plays it different to anybody else. But Leeds, now, what is the latest there?
Coming off the back of they'd be very pleased with that 0-0 draw at St James's Park. One of the biggest surprises from the game was seeing Adam Forshaw starting alongside Taylor Adams with Roca, the player that's dropping out. The Spaniard that brought him back. Other positions which are potentially up for grabs. You've got Ayling, who could come at right back, Christensen. Those two are sort of vying for the spot, although majority of the time Jess March does go with Christensen. And I have brought Somerville back into that team, but is it Nonto? Gononto? I think there's my first one of 2023, the name that I've butchered. He would be the other player that's pushing for that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Somerville as well. Had some great form. Unfortunately, picked up that ankle ligament problem during those mid-season games. So I think he's had enough time on the training pitches. Jack Harrison is another one. Just slight question mark because he has been managing an issue with regards to his groin.
There you go. So we've got potentially our first one of 2023. Now Leicester, the Foxes, they've just looked pretty bad. They've looked bad all season, but they had that little purple patch of form that made people think that they were good. But let's be honest, Liverpool were very, very lucky in that game. 2 own goals by Wesley Face. Is that how you say his name?
Fass. Is it Fass?
Fass, Vice. I don't know. There you go. There's the second one. It's like buses. We don't have one for ages, and then 2 come along at once. But 2 own goals there. They didn't look that good in the game, and there was points where, to be fair, Leicester looked the better side. But overall, they're just not clicking at the moment. And I think one of the big problems is the absence of James Maddison. Is there any positive news there? Because it seems like it could be a serious issue because he needs more testing. Is that correct?
He went down to see a specialist for a second opinion down in London over like the festive period. Pain is now presenting anteriorly to the front of the knee as opposed to the back, where it was right behind the knee. So until they find the underlying cause of this issue and address that, then unfortunately it's just going to keep James Maddison out of contention. So yeah, he's going to be a massive miss for them. It was maybe a little bit of a surprise after having lost Maddison, like they dropped Yuri Tielemans from the starting 11 at Anfield. You know, he's another creative player, but maybe, Brendan Rodgers was looking at, packing that midfield, and then Duty alongside Sumari was the way to go. And yeah, they were a little bit unfortunate. I still can't quite get my head around why he insists on dropping Jamie Vardy game on game. I think he just brings something completely different to that that Leicester team, even though, yes, he's pushing, those twilight years as well, and he cannot perform week in and week out. But having been benched against Newcastle, then I certainly expect him to start against Liverpool. Now Padson Daka is out with a hamstring problem. I'm hoping that he decides to go with Vardy as opposed to maybe Kelechi, who, again, just flatters to deceive a little bit and hasn't quite lived up to the billing.
What do you think is the main problem with Leicester then? Some of it for me is tactics, but can any of this be put on injuries as well?
They've had injuries to key personnel. I think you cannot really overstate the loss of Johnny Evans and what he brings in terms of maybe just trying to solidify that back line a little bit. I know you're not a huge fan of that Leicester defensively, but I think heading into the break, I think they had 7 clean sheets out of 8. So it is something that they have been working on the training pitches after a disastrous start to the season. I think it's a little bit of both. Danny Ward as well. I think, ultimately, you're going to need a keeper with confidence who can control that backline, who's vocal, who understands. And I just think Ward, maybe hasn't got that, and losing even Schmeichel, despite I know what some of those underlying numbers were before his departure. I still think they're big shoes to fill, and maybe it's took him a little bit of a while to get used to that number one position.
So Liverpool are the team up next, and again, like we said, that they weren't in the best of form, but also huge loss and lots of questions about this. Robertson, his injury, what is the latest on that? And kind of given the time frames and everything, is that going to be one where he's just rested? No need to risk him.
The actual initial problem was picked up prior to the game in a warm-up, and it was a heavy collision with teammate Harvey Elliott. Impact, knee on the hip, that caused the problem there. He was able to play, but then all of a sudden in and around that, I think that hour-long mark, just sort of seized up. So the actual injury itself, a dead leg, nothing too serious. That's, it's very short-term. But the reason I've went for Tsimikas, again, due to that quick turnaround, just a little bit of player management, giving you that upcoming games, and to give Tsimikas a little bit of a run out. But like I say, it's one of those ones. This will purely come down to Jurgen Klopp, because I don't think the injury itself, is anything to worry about. Other talking points, I have Naby Keita starting in there again, just because of all of the issues that Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's had over recent times. That could be, maybe a first Premier League start for Naby Keita. So that's a bit of a gamble with regards to that. And I've also brought Fabinho straight back in there. That would be the expense of Harvey Elliott. Picked up a little bit of a knock, but again, nothing too serious. That's just a case of managing the player and bringing back in the Brazilian after he missed out because his wife was expecting another baby on Friday.
And no Cody Gakpo, which I think a lot of people were looking forward to, but the paperwork's not gone through yet, has it?
Well, that was always going to be the difficulty, because it was a public holiday. So the long and the short of it is we just don't know. We're playing percentages here, and Jurgen Klopp had even said, look, I'm not expecting that paperwork to be done. And you know what, even if it is, there's no rush. He's going to have minimal time with these new teammates. So, why not just wait that few extra days and no need to take any chances. But like I say, there are no guarantees with that one. This is not like this will come down to being able to register the player, and whether that's being able to happen because of, when these, when the 1st of January actually fell.
And what about Carvalho? He could play in those forward positions. Do you think him instead of Keita is a possibility?
I looked at that. I think I had Carvalho actually started last time out ahead of Oxlade-Chamberlain. So I was surprised as well that he wasn't introduced from the bench. And I was a little bit surprised at how few starts he had actually made in the Premier League. So yeah, by all means, I think the Carvalho is a more than a credible option ahead of Naby Keita.
It just remains to see if it will be done, because like you said, it'd probably been a good chance from last match as well. Manchester City are up next, and is there you always shake your head with them because they're so hard to predict. I mean, let's go to the big question. Cancelo, why was he dropped again, or why was he not played again?
The assumption can only be that it's the involvement of post-World Cup, because for the life of me, I don't really fully understand why Pep does this. A lot of those players, look at the Phil Foden scenario. You speak to most people, most managers, Phil Foden should be probably one of the first names on that City team sheet. Such as his importance and his impact and what he brings. He was one of the bright sparks against Everton, during that short cameo. But more often than not, he's finding himself again on the fringes of that starting 11. It's frustrating. But the fact that they couldn't put Everton away, to me, just means that it's going to prompt change, and it's going to maybe force his hand in terms of recalling some of those big guns. If it doesn't happen this game week, honestly, I just wash my hand. You know what it is? I'll just leave the team blank next time. I'll just let anybody just decide, because he's lost. I mean, for me, he got exactly what he deserved against Everton, going out with a team like that. I think you can get away with it on the odd match, but no.
People have got questions like, no Akanji, no this player. But then Marius, you've asked the question, but then you've also answered it yourself. Pep does Pep things. Like, it transcends logic. It doesn't make sense. And I totally agree with you as well with, they got what they deserved. They were almost a bit too cocky in the game against Everton. They went 1-0 up. And then if you look at the XG map, they didn't really have any attacks at all after going 1-0 up. And obviously Everton's chance was, I think, their only shot of the match. Not always games go like that. But also, if you don't have a bit of a lead, if you don't try and at least cement something, you can be caught out like that. And then after the goal, they suddenly go, oh, right, we'll start attacking again. It was too little too late. So I totally agree with you. And maybe a lack of respect for the opposition as well, Ben.
Yeah, possibly. And I tell you what, they were very, very fortunate that Erling Haaland didn't receive a red card. I thought that was a pretty
robust challenge.
Yeah, and look, maybe in days gone by, you would have got away with that. But in the modern era, with VAR, very surprised that once it was looked at, that the decision, it wasn't clear, because if you had a call, that was dangerous. That was dangerous. And now it's, even if you catch the player or not, that doesn't necessarily make the decision. It's the intent was there, and that could have been, a really serious setback for, was it Ben Godfrey? I'm not, certainly the Everton defender, but yeah. Very fortunate.
Yeah, it was almost unnecessary as well. Realistically, he was never going to win that ball, and it was a bit of, again, because the match wasn't going their way, it was a bit of anger, wasn't it? Manchester United now, they're just for people in terms of my writing and stuff. I do have a Patreon, you can check it out. But they're one of 4 teams that have actually improved in XG and XG conceded data from this time last season to this time this season. But I'm still not really sold on them as a good team. They're still kind of bottom half of the table attack. They're not great, but I guess they're better than they were. But the interesting inclusion for me is Martial once again. I mean, 3 games in close succession, but also the big booster will be Martinez returning as well.
Well, that's what I'm thinking anyway. He was omitted from the match day squad last time out because he didn't have that accumulative load on the training pitches, according to Erik ten Hag. So this will come down to how much training he believes he's actually done. I think Luke Shaw's day as a centre-back alongside Varane is gone. Push him back out to the left-hand side. Other options could be Harry Maguire and also Victor Lindelof. Both of those players have recovered after illness. I just think, Martinez has to start, doesn't he? World Cup winner. Took a couple of days to get, all of those celebrations of out in Buenos Aires out of his system. And then he'll drop back in. And of course, we've got Marcus Rashford back in that starting 11. Massive disappointment throughout the FPL community last time out when they found out that it was an internal disciplinary matter that brought about his omission from the starting 11. Of course, it was, and that was due to his, whether he turned up late for a team meeting or he missed a team meeting. That was the reason behind that. But strange again for Erik ten Hag. I think you either you have these disciplinary procedures in place where you either punish the player fully or not at all. And to punish him and not have him in the starting, but include him on the bench and then start him, I'm not fully into that. I think he's either in the squad or he isn't in the squad. So, but thankfully, I'm a Marcus Rashford owner, and we get the points from his goals. So, it's been and gone, and I think he starts.
Yeah. The other question that a lot of people have asked about is Dalot, especially because Wan-Bissaka's 4.3, and a lot of interest in the Manchester United defence. You know, for what I said, they are improved, and especially at the back, slightly conservative football, and so I think that's part of the reason why they're not that exciting for me going forward. But yeah, Wan-Bissaka, Shaw, Varane, they're all garnering attention. But Dalot, surely, if he is likely back soon, but is he likely back soon?
He's back on the training pitches, so he's working outside. So he's on the next phase of his recovery, and he's certainly not a million miles away from where he needs to be following that hamstring problem. But as we know, Erik ten Hag loves his players to be in tip-top condition, and there's no corners to be taken, with hamstring injuries. So the fact that, Man United are winning and Wan-Bissaka is back and in that team, and, he's doing okay, that eases that burden, that pressure of needing to rush Diego Dalot back into that team. So like I say, he is certainly heading in the right direction. He's not a million miles away, but because of how things are going for United, that might, helps that decision-making process for Ten Hag.
Marius is a cruel, cruel man. He says this is the game where Martial will get injured or subbed off at half-time. Marius, you're evil for wishing that on the FPL community. Now, obviously, Newcastle, don't need to talk about them because they're nothing this game week. No, I'm joking, Ben. The news against Arsenal, are the team, pretty much the full 11, the best 11 that you'd want out there for that game against Arsenal?
I certainly do, to start with the best 11, but in terms of, are they the best team in terms of where they are fitness and sharpness wise? Probably not. Callum Wilson, has missed a little bit of time on the training pitches due to illness, but he's done enough, or I think he's done enough to prove himself to Eddie Howe. So he's in a good position, and I think he probably takes over from Chris Wood. Elsewhere within that team, I still think it's very hard for Eddie Howe to be making any big decisions with regards to that lineup, just on the back of that 0-0 with Leeds. There's been enough recovery time between matches, so they should be fully refreshed. And like I say, hopeful of going to Arsenal and maybe at least taking a point.
Dilpreet has asked, will Trippier get rested?
Nope. Absolutely 100% no chance of Trippier getting rested. We've seen that before the World Cup, and that break, was one of those players that had been struggling with a little bit of a hamstring issue. But such is its importance, and not only that, the decision, player led, he wants to be out there performing. So look, not in my opinion, I don't think there's any chance that Trippier drops out that starting 11.
Fair enough. It's going to be a banger, that game. I can't wait for it, and we will be messaging each other frantically, won't we, Ben? Now, Nottingham Forest, they started the game quite slow against Chelsea, but then they grew into it, and actually towards the end I thought they should have probably won. And then looking on the stats after the game, they actually had higher XG than Chelsea. So, they went into that game. They looked strong at home in front of their home crowd. What is the kind of situation, though? Is there any players that are going to come and boost that side as well?
No, pretty much the players who we've got sidelined at the moment are fairly long-term. The latest being Jess Lingard. We've seen in game week 17, he sort of limped off. He had his right thigh heavily strapped. That was a hamstring issue that he went into the game. We talk about those recurrence, re-injury rates. that problem there setting back another month. So in terms of a Premier League return, we may not see Jess Lingard again until February. But thankfully, Morgan Gibbs-White was managed to shake off a calf problem to lead the Forest attack against Chelsea, and they're pretty much unchanged.
We've got some quick fire questions here. Brent says, start Trippier or Cancelo?
Do you know what? I would say Cancelo. I cannot see Pep. I cannot see Pep not starting Cancelo for the third successive game. And I can't see Newcastle keeping a clean sheet. I think it'll be an entertaining, high-scoring draw. So for that reason, I would go Cancelo.
Okay. Isaac coming back soon?
Not a million miles away. But if you're talking about pushing for a start in the Premier League, I think he's going to have to bide his time. He may look to get competitive minutes in his legs in the FA Cup at some point, whether that's round 3 or maybe more realistic round 4 if we progress.
Okay. And another quick question. Rashford or Mount as captain for this game week? You like it?
I'm not a big fan. Do you know what? Given the performance against Crystal Palace, I think Man United and Rashford.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. So continuing on, we have Southampton, one of the teams that not a lot of interest in. So just kind of quickly peruse through the 11 here, Ben.
Edozie's been one of the standout performers in recent games. Limped off last time out. Thankfully, that was just fatigue-related cramp. So he should be good. Maybe even a start for Stuart Armstrong following illness. Like you say, elsewhere within our team, don't really want to be going anywhere near their assets. They are struggling massively.
Massive strugglers. Tottenham. Now, there's a lot of discussion points on this. We've got loads of questions, mainly concerning Kulusevski. Did you see I said that quite right as well? Starting the year off great. So with Tottenham, they've looked pretty bad. Again, this is something that we've said for a while, that the team, they've just not clicking. I mean, is this injury based or is it tactics? I mean, is there any excuses? Because I think that's pretty much the strong starting 11 now, and they're still not getting good results. And also, you've got Kulusevski back in the 11.
Yeah, this is the problem. Is we have an MRI booked for Dejan Kulusevski. Kulusevski. So that's booked for today. So we'll not know really the true extent of his injury until we have those back. But heading into that, they're fairly confident and optimistic that it's just a minor issue, and they're hopeful that it was just going to miss that one game. So that one game would have been Aston Villa. So again, we're taking a little bit of a punt in including Kulusevski in that starting 11. But of course, muscle problems are exactly what they are, and Antonio Conte won't want to take any chances with that. If he was to miss out, then given the fact that Richarlison is also injured, that may push Perisic a little bit higher up the pitch in a 3-4-3, or he could even go with a 3-5-2 with that and pack that midfield. Elsewhere within that team, this does need a change. I'm in the process of changing that because East Basuma picked up his 5th caution of the campaign. So he's out. That means Oliver Skip probably will start. And I also have Matt Doherty out of that team on the right-hand side for Emerson Royal to come in. On the left-hand side, we could have Ryan Sessegnon. Like I say, if Kulusevski was to go out, Perisic move up, Sessegnon on the left. Also some, discussion around who can play in defence. We've seen Dyer drop out following his mistake against Brentford. Ben Davies was a one to come in. For me, I think this is more about Antonio Conte just doesn't look very happy. Just isn't, I just think he's a little bit unsettled between the scenes, and that's maybe filtering down into the squad. I don't think there's that harmony within the group. He's frustrated, and I think that frustration is spilling down into the players just in terms of how he's setting things up and how they're playing, because they're very disappointing. They look at that game against Aston Villa, and you would have thought that was surefire sort of 3 points to get back on the board. But no, that loss puts them under big pressure. Everything is, you're always so heavily reliant on Harry Kane. You take Harry Kane out of the equation, and you're then looking at who else is going to win you the match. Heung-min Son, hasn't done anything really since picking up that, since that injury. So he'll work hard, but we need them moments of brilliance, those match-winning situations. Just isn't come to the fore. And there's nobody else really within that Tottenham squad that's able at this point to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of an existential crisis for Tottenham as well, because do they stick with Conte? Do they back him? Do they buy the players for him? But he plays a very unique style that not a lot of managers replicate and can do. Or do they, bang in the project and say, Dilpreet has asked the question, when does Conte leave Spurs? Does he leave in the summer? Because that's when his contract is up. If they let him leave in the summer, if they don't sack him and get a new manager, and now it's another season wasted for the likes of Son and Kane. And again, you can't see the situation improving unless personnel changes as well. It's quite a worrying time for them, because Kane, Son, their body clocks are ticking. Will they want to stay around as well if there's another manager change, if there's another investment and a project? They really need to kind of decide on their future, because at the moment they're kind of in between. So we shall see, and it is quite a worrying time for those fans. Let's just hope that they keep up that bad run and into game week 20 as well. West Ham, we're nearing the end here, so if you've got any final questions, do send them in. But what is the injury news there? They're another team that have a bit of an existential crisis. What's happening with them? How are they playing? The only positive is their defence is still kind of strong, but they can't score goals.
Yeah, we've seen a slight change in formation from David Moyes last time out. Dropped to more of a 3 at the back with a 4. And that meant dropping Thomas Souček, I think, for the first time this season, and Paqueta sitting alongside Declan Rice. He said it's something that he would look to do again. And when I was talking to a West Ham supporter about my surprise anyway, from the outside looking in, seeing Souček dropped, and he went, West Ham supporters have been unhappy with Souček for a while, just in terms of, look, he works unbelievably hard, he covers a lot of ground, but in terms of his quality on the ball, he just doesn't have that, and constantly seems to give away possession. And he almost felt as if David Moyes made the decision to drop Souček to maybe appease that West Ham support, because of the growing pressure that the team's coming over. So again, that remains to be seen. And you touched upon it. If you haven't got anybody that up front that's able to score those goals, and that hasn't happened really under Scamacca, and certainly Antonio's maybe been a little bit found out, then the pressure's always going to, it's going to continue to mount. And these are difficult times for West Ham, and not, like you say, necessarily assets that I want to be going anywhere near at this point.
Marius, I think, wins the comments for today. He says, I wish Son and Kane to win some silverware, maybe at Newcastle.
I would take both of them at Newcastle, but what happens to my man, Callum Wilson?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Good players, but I don't think we'll ever have that decision to make with regards to who starts up front.
They'd have to get used to playing second fiddle to ASM and Callum Wilson. We're not going to dislodge them. Dilpreet has a question: Pope or Ward as goalkeeper?
Got to be.
It's a tough one, because they're both tough matches. Obviously, Leicester have got the double, but if they get absolutely shellacked in both, you could be looking at 0 or minus numbers.
Look, I'll go with Ward just purely on the fact that, like I said, I'm expecting goals with Arsenal. I think it's going to be an entertaining goal scoring draw.
Ooh,
That
okay.
way, we'll both be happy. Yeah.
And the final one is Wolves. Any news there?
No massive news in terms of personnel other than Diego Costa. That was a tactical withdrawal last time out. He was replaced by Adama Traore. Adama Traore looked really sharp, bright when he came on. One thing lacking in the middle of that, was somebody in the box to be able to put those, those decent crosses away. So that's why we have Costa playing. And I still think Costa are not great and past these best years, unfortunately, is still a better option than Raul Jimenez, who, post head injury just hasn't been able to find anywhere near, the levels that he did prior to that, horrific collision with David Luiz.
Well, that is the end of today's broadcast. We will be back very soon. When is the next one, Ben? I'm struggling to...
Well, we have an FA Cup coming up this weekend. So we're effectively going to be locked in now until game week 20, which will be sort of week commencing the 9th of January. So typically, all being well, we'll go with Friday at 2:15, which will be Friday, what is it, the 16th, maybe? Something like that.
Yeah.
Is that right? No, maybe it's not even that far ahead, but the Friday before the game week 20 deadline.
So
we've
got Friday the 13th is...
Friday there will go Friday the 13th.
Yeah, but there is a match on Thursday the 12th as well. That's the Fulham-Chelsea double game week one. So there you go. Well, hopefully everybody, you have a good game week, that you've had a great start to your 2023, and hopefully we start as we mean to go on with a nice big score as well. But for now, we're going to wish you the best of luck, the best of health, and we will see you